It always starts with the rumors. For months, the digital corridors of the wrestling world were filled with whispers, with grainy photos, with inside sources claiming this would be the night. But every week, the show would open, the music would hit, and it would be business as usual. The hope began to fade. The whispers turned to frustrated sighs. We all just accepted it. She was gone. And then, this past Friday on SmackDown, it happened. It wasn't a cold open. It wasn't a dramatic video package. It was in the middle of the show, right when we were settling in. The arena lights dropped. Not just dimmed, but a sudden terrifying blackout. A single, familiar sound cut through the darkness. Not music, just static. A sound we hadn't heard in so long, we almost didn't recognize it. Then the silence. A collective 10,000-person gasp. Every fan in that building held their breath, their phones instinctively rising. The ramp remained dark, 1 second, 2 seconds. The tension was unbearable. And then, she walked out. The sound that erupted from that crowd wasn't a cheer. It was a detonation. It was a physical release of months of frustration, hope, and loss. People were screaming, jumping, holding their heads in their hands. The camera panned across the front row, catching grown men and women openly weeping. It was pure, unfiltered chaos. After all the silence, she finally walked down that ramp again. The lights, the crowd, the energy. It was pure bedlam. This return changed everything. And the WWE universe, in one single deafening voice, went absolutely insane. While the arena was shaking, the atmosphere in the backstage gorilla position was the opposite. It was a vacuum, dead silence. The two wrestlers who were supposed to have their match next just stood there, staring at the monitor, their entrance music forgotten. Their entire story, the feud they had spent weeks building, was now irrelevant. The champion, the one who held the title she had made famous, just watched. Her face was a perfect mask of professionalism, but the camera zoomed in just enough to see her hands gripping the championship belt, shaking. The producers, the writers, the agents, usually barking orders and coordinating cameras, were frozen. They were just watching. They were fans again. Only one person wasn't surprised. The head of creative, standing in the back, just stared at the screen, a faint, knowing smile on his face. This was his ace, played at the perfect moment. But the feeling among the other talent was different. It wasn't just shock. It was dread. It was the sudden cold realization that the entire ecosystem had been thrown off its axis. The pecking order was gone. The next in line was suddenly at the very back of the line. She wasn't just a returning star. She was a returning center of gravity. Everything and everyone was now in her orbit. The muffled roar from the crowd finally bled through the curtain, a sound that felt less like a cheer and more like a force of nature. One veteran turned to a rookie, his face grim, and whispered, "That's it. Everything you worked for just got 10 times harder." Before she even reached the bottom of the ramp, the internet was broken. It wasn't just trending. It was the only thing. Phones in the arena, uploading blurry, shaky footage of the entrance, were the first wave. Then came the professionals. The news tickers on major sports networks interrupted their highlights. "Unconfirmed reports," they'd say. "A monumental return in the world of sports entertainment." Podcasters who had just finished recording their review of the show, complaining about its predictable nature, had to delete the entire episode and start over. Their planned titles were now obsolete. The only story was, "She's back." Retired legends, the Hall of Famers who had built the very ring she was walking to, started texting each other, their phones lighting up across the country. "Did you see it? Is she healthy? This is big." The narrative shifted instantly. It wasn't just a return. It was a statement. The company's stock was already being discussed in after-hours trading. But more than that, the questions began. Why now? Why this city? Who did she come for? The speculation engine, fed by months of starvation, went into overdrive. Every fan with a social media account became an investigative journalist. They analyzed the look in her eyes, the way she paused at the top of the ramp, the subtle changes to her gear. Nothing was an accident. And in that digital chaos, the woman herself hadn't even said a single word. She didn't have to. The explosion of her arrival was the only message needed. When the show finally cut to a commercial, the atmosphere backstage curdled. The initial, awe-struck shock wore off, and the cold, hard reality set in. This wasn't a one-night-only appearance. This was a full-time problem. The new generation, the women who had clawed their way to the main event spots in her absence, felt a shadow fall over them. They had been told this was their era. They had been promised the main event. Now the main event had just walked in, taken off her jacket, and wordlessly claimed the throne that had been kept empty for her. The veterans were split. Some, the ones who had shared a ring with her years ago, felt a surge of respect. They knew the standard had just been raised. They welcomed the competition. It would make them all better. But others, the ones who had quietly benefited from her absence, felt threatened. They saw their TV time, their merchandise sales, their championship opportunities, all evaporating. The champion was the epicenter of this anxiety. She sat alone in her locker room, a towel over her head, as producers and writers swarmed her, explaining the new plan for her night. Her dominant title reign, which had felt so important just an hour ago, now felt like a placeholder. She was no longer the protagonist of her own story. She was now the antagonist in her story, and the returning queen. She was in her own private dressing room, the one that had been kept locked for 6 months. To understand the explosion, you have to understand the silence that came before it. She didn't just leave. She vanished. There was no farewell tour, no celebratory speech, no thank you chant. There was just a match, a championship match she lost. A match where something felt wrong. After the 3 count, she didn't get up in anger. She didn't cry. She just sat there, cross-legged in the middle of the ring, as the lights went down and the show went off the air. And then she was gone. The official reports cited injury, burnout, personal time. But the rumors were darker. They whispered of betrayal, of creative promises broken, of being forced to pass the torch to someone she felt was undeserving, a corporate choice over an authentic one. She had built that division with her bare hands, shattering glass ceilings, and she had to watch as they gave the keys to someone else. Her silence became a protest. She went dark. No social media. No interviews. She cut herself off from the universe that claimed to love her, because she felt that love was conditional. She had to heal, not just her body, but her spirit. She had to forget the business to remember who she was. The company tried to erase her, removing her from video packages, focusing on the new era. But the fans didn't forget. They chanted her name in arenas she wasn't in. Her absence became a character in itself, a ghost that haunted the entire show. And now, the ghost was back, in the flesh. In the production truck, the chaos was controlled. While the fans screamed and the wrestlers panicked, the executives were doing math. The head of creative was on the phone with the network. Yes, the overrun is approved. Hold the commercial. We're staying with her. The merchandise team, given the green light just seconds before the entrance, was already uploading new designs. The She's Back t-shirt was live and for sale before she had even been handed a microphone. This wasn't just a creative triumph, it was a financial lifeline. Ticket sales for the next 3 cities she was scheduled for, schedules that were only confirmed an hour ago, were already exploding. The main event for the next pay-per-view, which had been a lukewarm and predictable title defense, was now scrapped. The new poster was already being designed in a graphics office miles away. This return was a secret kept by only 3 people. It was an enormous gamble. What if she wasn't ready? What if the crowd had moved on? But the sound from the arena answered that question with brutal finality. This was a reset button for the entire brand. Every struggling storyline, every sagging rating, every block of unsold tickets was just injected with pure adrenaline. The business was about to boom, all on the shoulders of one woman who hadn't even been on the payroll 24 hours ago. The pressure was immense. But for the Suits, it was just another very successful Friday night. Long after the arena lights had dimmed, long after the press had given up trying to get a comment, she sat in that private locker room. The sound was still ringing in her ears. The adrenaline was finally fading, replaced by the familiar deep ache in her bones. She picked up her phone. It was unusable, crashing from the hundreds of messages and tags. She ignored them all and dialed one number. A voice picked up, sleepy but alert. "You did it." She leaned her head back against the cold steel locker. The receiver pressed to her ear. "I did it," she whispered. Did you watch?" There was a pause on the other end. "We watched. Your father, he was worried, but he smiled. He hasn't smiled like that in a long time." She closed her eyes. The roar of 10,000 people was one thing. This was another. This was the validation she needed. "Are you okay?" the voice asked, the warmth now strained with worry. "The way you stepped onto the ropes, you didn't favor your bad side, did you?" She hadn't even realized. The pain was there, a dull throb, but the moment had masked it. "I'm fine," she lied. "I'm just tired." "Get some rest," the voice said gently. "It's starting all over again, isn't it?" She looked at the championship belt sitting on the monitor across the room, the one she hadn't come back for, but the one everyone assumed she wanted. "Yeah," she said, her voice hardening. "It's starting, but this time, I'm finishing it." The champion didn't leave the arena until almost 2 a.m. She had to stay. She had to film a digital exclusive, reacting to the return. She had to act professionally annoyed, indignant, and ready for a fight. She had to say the lines they wrote for her. "This is my house now. She's a legend, but I'm the present." But her voice cracked. She watched the playback with the producer, and she hated it. She looked weak. She looked scared. Because she was. She had spent years scratching and clawing to get to this spot. She had endured the injuries, the bad storylines, the empty arena shows. She had finally won the title, the real one, and the crowd was finally behind her. They respected her. And in one night, in the span of one single entrance, all of it was gone. The crowd that had chanted her name last week was now chanting hers. She drove back to her hotel in silence, the championship belt sitting on the passenger seat. It felt heavier tonight. It felt like a prop. She knew what was coming. She was going to be the first mountain the returning queen had to climb. She was the transitional champion, the footnote in the legend's comeback story. She punched the steering wheel, a single tear of pure frustration cutting through her makeup. "I earned this," she whispered to the empty car. "I earned it." The next week, the show opened with her. No music, no pyro. Just her, in the center of the ring, sitting on a single steel chair. The crowd was electric, chanting her name, but she didn't play to them. She didn't smile. She waited and waited until the arena fell into an uneasy silence, confused by her coldness. "You all seem very happy to see me," she began, her voice quiet, but echoing in the suddenly tense arena. "You chant my name. You wear my shirts. You cried when I walked out." "Where?" She paused, looking directly into the main camera. "Was all of this when I was gone?" The silence was now deafening. A few boos started, mixed with confused cheers. "You chant, 'You deserve it,' at the woman holding my title," she said, gesturing to the champion who was watching backstage. "You bought the new paint job. You bought the corporate narrative. You bought the new era. You forgot about me. You moved on." This wasn't the comeback they wanted. This wasn't the smiling hero, happy to be home. This was something else. This was someone broken, someone angry. "I didn't come back for her," she said, shaking her head. "I didn't come back for this," she said, pointing at the championship belt hanging above the arena. "I came back for the one person who orchestrated my exit, the one who sat in his comfortable office and told me my time was up. I'm not here to win a championship. I'm here to burn an empire to the ground. And I'm starting with him." And just like that, the entire narrative changed. The pop, the return, the moment. It was all a misdirection. We, the audience, were guilty of the very thing she was accusing us of. We wanted the simple story. We wanted the returning hero to vanquish the new champion and reclaim her rightful throne. We wanted the nostalgia. We didn't want the complicated, messy truth. We didn't want to hear that the place we loved, the business we watched every week, was flawed. The champion backstage, who had spent the entire week dreading this confrontation, suddenly found herself in an impossible position. She wasn't the target. She was just a symptom of the problem. And the returning queen, she wasn't a hero. She was an avenger. The eruption of the crowd wasn't the climax of the story. It was just the prologue. She had used our love, our desperation for her return, as a weapon. She used it to get a microphone, to get a live camera, to get back inside the building she had been cast out of. The war wasn't going to be in the ring, not really. It was going to be for the ring. The "she's back" moment wasn't about a comeback. It was about a takeover. And the WWE Universe, who had cheered her return so wildly just 1 week ago, suddenly had to ask themselves a terrifying question. Were they cheering for the right person?